G'day guys, welcome back to the second annual Towns Bowie Build-Off. Before I get into the details, I'd like to make a quick thank you to Nordic Edge and Otway Fiddleback for donating prizes for the prize pool going to the competitors that'll be competing in this year's competition. So thank you to them so much for supporting this part of the community and helping out with prizes for everyone. A quick recap for those of you who may not know what the Towns Bowie Build-Off is. It's a competition I started last year that involved building a Bowie knife over a period of 2 months to a set design that I created, or a set of parameters, not specifically a design, by makers all over the world for a prize pool of about 5 prizes. This year there will be 5 prizes again, and I'll get into them a little bit later, but for now, all you need to know is that last year we had about 30 entrants, all of whom made amazing tools and weapons and all of the other kinds of things that a knife can be. But I was absolutely blown away with the input from last year, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what people come up with this year. As I've hinted at in my social media and on the Forgecast, I have changed a couple of the design rules for this year to make it a little bit more challenging, but we also have 2 brackets. We have the main Bowie build-off bracket, and then we also have the beginner build-off bracket. So if you're a beginner knife maker that's been making for less than 2 years and can, prove that through social media or anything like that, then you will be open for the beginner bracket of competition, which will have a separate design classification other than the main build-off. So if you're interested in joining it, you don't have to necessarily compete against, like master smiths and all that kind of stuff. There will still be a prize bracket for you guys. So I want as many people as they can to get in on this. And even if you don't think you can win, just get in there and do it anyway, because competing is better than not. And as long as people are following the hashtag and, throwing it out there, then people are going to be seeing your work anyway. And this is a really great way to publicize your work to the greater community. So as I said in the early start of this video, there will be 3 main prizes, which will be judged by me specifically. And then there'll be 2 other prizes. And the first 3 prizes are in 3rd place. If you win 3rd place, you will get a selection of Otway Fiddleback stabilized woods. There'll be various kinds of woods. I don't actually have them in my possession yet because they're currently being stabilized, but it'll be a selection of some of the finest stabilized Australian woods you can get your hands on. Second will be a bar of Damascus, dimensions as yet to be figured out, but it will be a fairly sizable bar made by myself. And you know me, I like to play around with, layer densities and stuff like that. So it should be a fairly interesting bar of Damascus. I will give all the details. It will be 1084 and 1520 and maybe a little bit of ACRV2 as well. And then in 1st place, you will have the ability to opt for any kind of hammer, weight, style, and head shape and all that kind of stuff by me. So at the end of the competition, if you win 1st place, you'll be able to contact me and order a custom hammer of your very own design, or one that I'm famous for making, either way, and I will make it for you and send it to you wherever you are in the world. The 4th prize will be a viewer's choice prize. So at the end of the build-off, when everyone has submitted their entries, I will be doing a video where I'll be announcing the main 3 winners and the winner of the beginner's bracket, and then there will be a week for people to vote on all of the makers, every knife that was made in the competition, to win the Viewer's Choice Award. And the Viewer's Choice Award is this year is donated by Nordic Edge, and it is one of their fantastic knife vices. I recently had one delivered to me, and it is amazing. I love it. It has replaced all of my hand sanding jigs and everything in my shop. So absolutely fantastic bit of kit. So I'm really, really glad for Nordic Edge to have sponsored us with this awesome piece of equipment, and that it'll be going to someone who the viewers believe is the best builder. And that can be one of the main 3 or the beginner bracket winner. So it will be literally anyone. For the winner of the beginner's bracket, which will again be selected by myself, and I may get some feedback from a couple of other knife makers that don't actually put anything in for the competition, they will be winning a world-famous Nordic Edge file guide. They were formerly Creative Man, and Creative Man file guides are used the world over. They are probably the best file guide on the market, in my very humble opinion, and I love them to bits. So this is a fantastic piece of kit for any beginner knife maker, and I think it would be the perfect prize to win as a beginner. So if you're interested in entering the beginner's bracket, you could win a fantastic tool. Finally, the moment you've been waiting for, the parameters for the hashtag Townsbow build-off for 2022. Now, like last year, you must have a blade of greater than 8 inches in length. I am not putting a handle length distinction on this one, so you can go wild with that if you like, and there's no overall length maximum. But there is a minimum blade length, and that is from the tip to the front of the guard, not to the plunge cut, but to the front of the guards, because some people will have ricasso, some others won't. It must have quillons, so it must have a top and bottom quillon on the guard this year for the main entries. So no bolstered buoys like the Searles buoy and stuff like that. It is just quilloned buoys all round this time. It must have a sharpened or unsharpened swedge or clip. So it can be a scooped swedge, it can be a harpoon, it can be a rounded swedge, but it has to have that narrowing point, that double-edged feature at the tip of the blade. It doesn't matter what length it is, it just has to be there on the blade. And the monkey wrench I'm throwing in the works this year is that it must feature a sparring bar. Now, I will explain what a sparring bar is in the next clip, so please don't look away yet, and especially because there is another point that I have to make for the requirements, so you have to watch this to the end, all of you, because there is one very specific thing that you're going to have to pay attention to. But the sparring bar is required on any design that you make this year. So a sparring bar being the spine cover on a Bowie knife, and this year it can be integral, it can be brass, it can be Damascus, it can be anything you like, but it has to be there. So we'll get into that in a second. But like I said, stick around because there is one final requirement for this Bowie competition this year. So make sure you're watching. For the beginner's bracket, we're basically with the old rules from last year. You must have an 8-inch blade length from tip to the front of the guard. You must have a bolster or guard on it, so you can have a quillonless bolster, or you can have a single quillon guard or anything like that. It doesn't have to be a double quillon for beginners, and it has to have a sharpened or unsharpened swedge. Now, when it comes to sharpened or unsharpened, this goes for the main and the beginners. Check your local laws, because there are some places where they don't like you having a double-edged blade, so having them unsharpened is important. But it must have that back bevel on at least, maybe a third of the blade length, although the length isn't exactly required. So those are the only 3 rules for the beginners. And now the final point before we get into explaining what a sparring bar is. So this most vital of rule comes from a little bit of the confusion last year because I wasn't exactly sure how I was taking entries and tried to check things like hashtags and stuff like that, but Instagram is notoriously unreliable, and I wanted to make sure that I got accurate entries for all of the blades. So I need any entry sent to me via samtownsbladesmith@gmail.com. I highly suggest using the hashtag TownsbowBuildoff and using all of the hashtags and posting it to social media alongside your build, just for publicity's sake. But for the actual entry, I require you to email the photos to my email. It's also in the description below. It's also on my social media as well, so it's not hard to find. And if you can't find it for whatever reason, you can message me on Instagram or Facebook, and I will direct you there. It has to be 3 photos minimum. The one photo has to be a full profile shot, well lit, with a ruler or tape measure or something in frame that can show me that the blade is the correct length. And the reason I want a full profile shot is not only does it help me establish the flow of the design, it lets me see how everything mates up with itself, but it also gives me that measurement, which is part of the parameters. The other 2 photos, I highly recommend. They're not required. Make sure you've got good lighting. Make sure that you take at least one shot from the pointing towards the tip down the handle and one pointing down the handle towards the tip. And I would suggest sending multiple photos, not just the minimum 3, but that I'll leave that to you. Photograph the best details of your work, because the more detailed your photos, the more likely I am to look kindly upon it. If I get grainy, out of focus shots, I'm not going to be able to properly judge the quality of your work. So the better shots you take, the better I'm going to be able to judge it. And if you're looking for advice on how to shoot photos of your work, my friend Alex Norton, my co-host from the Forgecast, actually has a class coming out soon. He also has a couple of videos on his channel of how to take photos of your work. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, go over there and head to his channel. But that being said, those are the only three I need. And the big one is the profile shot with the ruler. But remember, I'm going to be promoting these on my channel in the announcement videos. So if you want me to show the best photo of the work, I need that one for judgment. But if you want a really good shot of the work, the better the shot, the better it looks on the announcement video. So that's up to you. I will put some reference photos up as I've been talking of the three shots that I'm talking about, and so you guys can get an idea of what I'm looking for. What is a sparring bar? Now, sparring bars are normally seen on Muso style buoys, and anyone who knows me knows that I love Muso buoys. So the sparring bar is basically a softer piece of metal normally that covers the spine of a knife, ostensibly. And the reason it's called a sparring bar is to catch the opponent's blade, or to have a soft resistant area for the blade to catch in on the spine of the knife when you're in a knife fight. Realistically, it doesn't serve much of that purpose anyway in a knife fight, because that's not how knife fights work, but they look cool. So the myth is that Jim Bowie, who was a famous knife fighter, requested a sparring bar on one of his knives purely to catch opponents' blades in the midst of combat. But I think it's just, it looks cool, and it's, you know, kind of a nice idea, although it doesn't actually work in practice. Now, as I said, the sparring bar does not have to be brass or copper as it was standard in the time of Jim Bowie. It can be integral to the piece. It can be Damascus. It can be steel. It can be any form of metal, but it has to be a separate, well, it doesn't have to be a separate piece of metal, but it has to be a standout piece of metal along the spine. And you can look at photos of like the Muso buoy and various, if you search sparring bar on Google, you'll find many reference images. But normally it is attached in one of several ways. You can either braze it on, which is a very common technique, or silver solder it on. And you would normally do that before heat treatment with a very high temperature solder or braze. You can solder it on afterwards, but you just have to be very careful to control your heat work around the edge. So like, you know, keep your edge submerged in water, or, you know, maybe wrapped with a towel. Or you can pin it. Pinning requires that you drill the holes in the blade, and that can cause issues if you drill them before hardening and especially after hardening. But it also means that you'll have to make sure that your pins either match the material and are countersunk so that they completely disappear, or you make them a status symbol. So you have a brass sparring bar with copper domed pins or something like that, make them stand out, because otherwise it looks just ugly if you've got circles around your pins in your sparring bar. And that's the same with bolsters and stuff like that as well. It's always unsightly to see the outline of your pins if you can avoid it. Another way to do it is to make it integral, forge it in there, which if anyone's brave enough to do that, I'm wholeheartedly support you. You could also forge weld it on. You could forge weld a wrapped bar around the top of your blade as you've finished forging, although controlling any cut-in that happens around that transition would be a nightmare. I would look into Salem Straub's method of forge welding on his integral bolsters, or, you know, forge welded bolsters, which he has a really great video on his channel. Another method you could do is just to tack weld it or grub screw it from the top, right? So drill a hole in the top of the sparring bar and either tack weld through if it's steel, or grub screw. Grub screw is going to look a little ugly, but it's another method depending on how thick the spine of your blade is, obviously. And the other way is to attach it at the quillons, at the guard, so braze it or solder it or anything like that at the quillons, and just make it hug the top of the knife, and then use some form of epoxy or something like that to just stop it from rattling when it's being used. But any way that you attach this, it has to be affixed to the blade semi-permanently, right? If it's a takedown knife and you've got it attached to the quillons and you can remove the whole thing, that's cool. One way that I have heard about but never seen is dovetailing. If you have a mill, you could dovetail the spine and actually have the sparring bar slot on with your guard. And that would be incredible to see. I don't have the setup to do that kind of thing, but that is another way to attach your sparring bar. But yeah, it's a relatively simple thing to do, but it's not something many people attempt because it does appear fairly complicated and can be a little bit daunting. So that's why I wanted to add it to this, mainly because I really, really like sparring bars, but at the same time, it's a challenge that I see not a lot of knife makers have actually taken up. And so doing it well is going to be the real trick. And again, a huge thank you to Björn at Nordic Edge and Ryan at Otway Fiddleback for sponsoring this year's Townsbury Build-Off. Without them, I would find it very difficult to come up with all of the prizes for the various knife makers that are going to be putting in work, hopefully. So I will link to all of their social media and their websites as well in the description down below. So please go over to there and show them some love because they make some awesome stuff and they're also just genuinely nice people. So thank you for that. And also, I'd like to say a very quick thank you to my patrons who make this kind of content possible. They keep the hammer in my hand, they keep gas in my tank, and they honestly keep me going on the days where I feel like I should give up. So I can't say enough about these people and the support they give me. And honestly, without them, this kind of thing would not be happening. So thank you to them. And if you want to support my channel by becoming a patron, the link will be down in the description below or at the end card of the video. With that being said, good luck to all of the participants. If you have any questions, please feel free to message me on Instagram, Facebook, or email me at samtownsbladesmith@gmail.com. Again, linked in the description below. I am so looking forward to seeing what you guys come up with. Make sure that you don't do anything I wouldn't do, but if you do, get it on film so I can watch it and laugh at your mistakes. And I'll see you next time. Bye-bye, guys.